Hello once again, everybody, and thank you for joining me here on this Monday, April 5th edition of ATS Radio. I'm your host, Adam Burke. I'll be joined today by Kyle Hunter, professional bettor and handicapper over at huntersportspicks.com. We're going to chat about Baylor versus Gonzaga, wrap up the college basketball season, then talk a little bit of Major League Baseball as well, as Kyle, a very good baseball handicapper, will get some of his thoughts, some of his betting strategies here to finish up this last edition of ATS Radio with Kyle for this season here. We'll be doing just the Bettors Box beginning next week on Mondays and Thursdays. So for one last time here with Kyle Hunter of huntersportspicks.com. Over at ats.io, my daily MLB article is posted every single day. Lots of hard work, lots of write-ups, lots of analysis in those. If you can soldier through the early part of the season where I'm laying a lot of groundwork for the starting pitchers, my handicapping strategy, the stats I use to handicap, so on and so forth, it will get more streamlined as we get some sample size, as we get into the season, as we get some actual stats to use in the breakdowns of these games. So stick with it here in the early going, talking about a lot of different things. Like I said, laying that foundation. But as we get deeper into the season, it will get a little bit shorter in nature. I'll have a Masters preview for you today over at the website. Still doing the NBA and NHL situational betting articles. We got picks and predictions from our talented cast of writers. Lots of good stuff over at ats.io for you to check out. And, of course, you can see all of it in the ATS app as well, which you can download from the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. A bet tracker, an odds screen, all the articles from the website, a stats database, premium model subscriptions available. Lots of good stuff in that app, so you can download that today for your Android or iOS device. With that, we bring on professional bettor and handicapper Kyle Hunter from huntersportspicks.com at Kyle Hunter Picks on Twitter. Kyle, how's it going today, my friend?
Going well, man. Let's do this thing one more time.
One more time here. And, we got the game that I think we wanted, too. We kind of talked about how the upsets in the first and second round were great. And, it's kind of cool. You get the Cinderella story and, the underdogs and the double-digit seeds and everything. But I don't want to see any of those teams in the national championship. I want to see teams the caliber of Baylor and Gonzaga, and that's what we've got here with probably, throughout the course of the year, the consensus number 1 and number 2 teams in the country. So this is the game we all wanted, the game that we kind of deserve, I think.
Yeah, this was first, the UCLA Gonzaga game was a tremendous game on Saturday night. That was my favorite college basketball game in quite a while. Love finishes like that. UCLA played really well, and I want to say we need to give credit to Mick Cronin for the coaching job he did with that team. Maybe I underrated him a little bit. Good defensive-minded coach, and then obviously it helps when you're making so many jumpers like they were. But UCLA put a great effort into that game. Gonzaga pulls off the win. Now the turnaround here quick to the Monday night game, and Baylor Gonzaga. Like you said, I think this is the game we all wanted. The first thing I want to say here is there's a couple things that are really interesting to me about this. There's 51% of the bets are on Gonzaga and 51% of the money's on Gonzaga. So we see no split here. So it looks like the odds makers did a good job at -4, 4.5, most of them 4.5 at this point. You can lay 4 at some different books, especially if you're willing to pay -115. This was -6.5 on the look ahead lines. There were a couple -6s on look aheads as well. So we've seen about a 2-point adjustment here. I'm not surprised. We remember what we just saw last. Gonzaga finally had a really close game. Baylor blew out Houston. I think that was more about Houston being really bad than anything else. Houston really looked poor on offense in that game. Baylor was never really troubled in a game like that. Gonzaga, I don't really think Gonzaga played that bad against UCLA. I think UCLA really played up. This is a Gonzaga team that I believe has won every single game by 10 points or more other than that last game. So Gonzaga has been beating everybody pretty easily. And then they finally have that really good test. There's two ways you could look at that. You could say Gonzaga plays a really tight game. That's great for them to be in a close game like this. Or you could say, you have a quick turnaround from a epic finish. It's hard to, be focused right from the beginning. The problem I have with that narrative is this is the national title game. It's hard to have a letdown spot in the national title game, because they know this is it. So I don't know. I don't know how you view that, but I think it's interesting that Gonzaga has had so many games where they've never had a tight game. Then they play that game that goes into overtime. Now a really quick turnaround to play Baylor. As far as momentum or situational spot, do you see this as any edge toward either team?
No, I don't think so. I think that for Gonzaga, I mean, look, if you kind of look at some of the advanced analytics and some of the things about that box score, Gonzaga should have won that game by a lot more. I mean, they forced UCLA into a lot of tough shots that the Bruins just happened to make. And kudos to them for that. One other game Gonzaga did play to single digits. They beat West Virginia by 5 back on December 2nd.
Yeah.
But West Virginia had 33 free throw attempts to 21 for Gonzaga, outscored the Bulldogs by 12 at the free throw line. And also, Kispert only played 32 minutes. He had 4 fouls. Watson fouled out. Timmy fouled out eventually in that game too. So Gonzaga was kind of in some foul trouble throughout that one. It was a very whistle-happy game, 48 personal fouls in that one. But it was a game where West Virginia was close because of free throws, more so than anything. Gonzaga had 35 shot attempts at the rim in that game against West Virginia, 25 of 35. So Gonzaga, that was a 5-point game, but certainly from the box score, it wasn't as close as that final score would suggest. This one was, to a degree. And one of the things that's been a problem for Gonzaga here so far in this tournament, and I did write about this, I did a preview for this game over at bangthebook.com. I let the others at ATS write up the preview for this one. But one of the things I did talk about with Gonzaga here in this tournament so far, their turnover percentage on defense, 15%, 18.8, 15.1, 13.9, and 13.5. They have not forced turnovers in this tournament. One thing that Baylor does and has done all year is force turnovers. Now, they had a low turnover percentage against Houston, but that was a game where they took that thing over in the first half. It was not a game at halftime or anything like that. Baylor, 31.2%. That was the Hartford game. But then 21.8, 27.8 against Villanova, 21.9 and 18.8. That's the big question I have in this game here for Gonzaga. If they lose the turnover battle, and it does appear that they have the chance of doing that, how much does that negatively impact their ability not only to cover the spread, but to possibly win this game? We know they're very efficient on offense, but so is Baylor. So that's the big question that I have here tonight is, does Gonzaga force some turnovers, or are they able to maintain control of the basketball like they have in most of their games this season?
Yeah, it's a good point, and I have some numbers on that one. Baylor's first in the nation in points per game off turnovers, 21.4 points per game off turnovers. Gonzaga only allows 10.2 points per game off their giveaways, which is in the 97th percentile in the country. I think there's a pretty significant caveat to that, though, is Gonzaga really does not face many teams who use ball pressure to the degree that Baylor does. Gonzaga plays in the West Coast Conference where virtually nobody presses and nobody even really plays the type of defense that Baylor does. Sometimes in past years, the way that Gonzaga has lost in the NCAA tournament has been because they do struggle with pressure, with turnovers. And I don't think Gonzaga will force a lot of turnovers in this game. The question is, are they going to turn it over a lot? Suggs is a good ball handler. I think Suggs is an upgrade over what they've had in a lot of the years in the past. So I don't know that Gonzaga will turn it over a bunch here, but I do think they'll probably lose the turnover battle in this game. The other key matchup I would say is, offensive rebounding, defensive rebounding. Baylor's offensive rebounding was great against Houston. Remember at the beginning of that game, I think you even texted me something early. I mean, Baylor was just getting second, third chance points nonstop against a Houston team that's usually dominating on the boards. It wasn't happening in that game. The Zags have been really good on the defensive glass. I think that's a really key matchup as well. If you look at Gonzaga's defense in the last game against UCLA, I don't know that defense was really that bad. I've seen some people talking about the fact that UCLA put up that many points. Obviously Baylor's going to score a ton of points on them. Look, the total's really high for a reason. And I think, no wonder it's 159.5 or 159. These are two great offenses, but UCLA was wildly efficient in that last game. Johnny Juzang was just absolutely going crazy out there. He looks like a future NBA player to me. A lot of those mid-range jumpers and long twos, UCLA was taking some tough shots and just making them. I don't know that that was as much about Gonzaga's defense being bad as it was UCLA was just really good offensively in that game. And Baylor, they were excellent on offense against Houston. That game was 58 possessions. They scored 78 points, so 1.34 points per possession. Clearly both these teams have the opportunity to shoot very well. I don't think anybody could argue with the total being so high, but at the same time, Adam, you know me well enough to know that I can't take over 159 or 159 and a half in a football dome in a national championship game. So, that's just too high for me to take an over, under or nothing on that. When you look at the side here in this one, I think there are a few other things that interest me. Baylor's 59th in strength of schedule, according to Sagarin. Gonzaga's 81st. We talked about Baylor's defense and how after their COVID pause, they were really weak defensively. In the tournament, Baylor's corrected that in a big way. If you remember back at the beginning of the year, Baylor's defense was second or third in the country in defensive efficiency, and they looked tremendous on both ends. They look really good on defense again right now. So I think that if you look at the numbers now and say Baylor's the 27th best defense according to Ken Palm in adjusted efficiency, I think they're better than that. I really do. I think that's a bit skewed of a stat because they played so poorly right off that COVID pause. Gonzaga should be able to score here. And one concern I have for Baylor, I've talked about it before. Baylor is not good in defending in the low post. They're not very good at defending within 5 feet of the hoop. Baylor ranks in the 38th percentile defending post-up offense. Gonzaga is first in the nation. I would think we'd see a steady diet of Drew Timme getting the ball down low here. Can Baylor slow it down enough? I'm not sure. I think that on the Baylor side, Baylor's been excellent also at contesting jumpers. They've contested 57% of opponents' catch and shoot jumpers this year. Gonzaga has had only 29% of their catch and shoot jumpers contested according to Synergy. That's fewest in the country. So I guess the question there, Adam, is that more about Gonzaga's passing ability, which I think Gonzaga is the best passing team in the country. They really move the ball around really well. Is it more about that, or is it more about they haven't played defense as good as Baylor? I think there's some of both. I mean, Gonzaga is so good offensively. They're still going to get quite a few open jumpers, but you would think there'd be a few less open jumpers than they're at least used to, because 29% contested, you would think Baylor would do a better job than that. So I think there's a few interesting matchups there, and I know that I'm throwing out quite a few stats here for the listeners, but when there's one game like this, we try to go as in detail as we possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are a lot of good things here, a lot of matchups, and it's sort of, kind of a discussion on what you value more. Do you value Baylor's turnover percentage? Okay, I get it, but at the same time, Gonzaga doesn't really turn the basketball over. Was that a byproduct, as you said, of playing in the West Coast Conference, a league that is well down the board? I think it was like 27th or something like that of the conferences here in turnover percentage on defense. So they just don't, 24th actually, they don't force a lot of turnovers. So is Gonzaga's low turnover rate a byproduct of that? Or is it exactly what you said? They're such a phenomenal passing team that they can take care of the basketball. They have multiple ball handlers. Suggs is obviously the primary one, but they don't throw possessions away. They know where everybody is. They play with great rhythm and flow and continuity on offense. So maybe Baylor doesn't force as many takeaways. And if Baylor has to play defense in the half court, well, they're outside the top 100 in both 3-point percentage defense and 2-point percentage defense. Their defense was propped up significantly by that turnover rate. If they don't force the turnovers in this game, does Gonzaga just get a lot of clean looks, a lot of the shots that they want to take? Then the question, of course, for Gonzaga is, what do they do if Baylor is getting those extra possessions on the offensive glass? What happens in that situation? Are they able to play good post defense? If Baylor is getting offensive rebounds, does that put Timme into foul trouble? If it does, that takes away a big part of Gonzaga's offense. So I think live betting is a really good idea for this game to sort of see how things play out, to make sure that Timmy's not in foul trouble, like he was in that game against West Virginia, where if that's the case and Gonzaga goes from a post-oriented offense to a jump shot-oriented offense, Well, that probably plays really well into Baylor's hands. So I think there are a lot of intriguing things about this game. As I said, it's the game I wanted to see. And the one thing I will say here with regards to the spread, and you kind of alluded to this already, this was 6.5 based on all the look ahead lines. Haslametrics said, look, I've got Gonzaga a 7-point favorite over Baylor on a neutral. That was kind of the number we were looking at, anywhere from 6 to 6.5, possibly as high as 7. Okay, well, Baylor blows out Houston, who played in a horrific offensive conference. That's one thing I did get right on last week's show was Baylor minus the points. And shout out to our buddy Kiev O'Neill, who owes me not even just a beer, but probably a 6-pack with how that game went down with our side bet. But I think that was more about Houston. I think that was a game that said a lot more about Houston than it said about Baylor. Well, Gonzaga plays UCLA to this 3-point game where UCLA goes 17 of 25 in the mid-range to keep that game close, be in it, force overtime, of course. That's a massive outlier. Did what happened in the Final Four really necessitate a 2-point adjustment to this line? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either. And I think I'll have to bet at least something on Gonzaga in this game. I haven't decided exactly how I will do it, whether it's going to be, live bet or pregame, take the -4 and lay the -115. I think Gonzaga has proven themselves time and time again this year, and I don't think they have as many weaknesses as does Baylor. Now, coaching matchup, let's just say Scott Drew versus Mark Few. I think Scott Drew, we've probably given him too hard of a time here in some of the past years, but Drew really turned around this program. I mean, this program was in bad shape when he got there. So he's an excellent recruiter, obviously, a pretty good in-game coach as well. I think Mark Few is probably a little bit better coach than is Scott Drew. But, I think it's a good coaching matchup, certainly. One other question I had for you, Adam, is I'm wondering what you think about the tempo of this game, because we know what Gonzaga wants to do. Gonzaga wants this thing to be 80 possessions. Does Baylor want to play really fast, or is Baylor going to try to slow this game down a little bit? I think it'll be really interesting to see, because if I was Baylor, I don't think I want to play this game in transition nonstop. Baylor's transition defense isn't that great. Baylor does too much going after offensive rebounds and doesn't get back because of that. So if they continue to crash the offensive boards that much and not get their guards back, Gonzaga is going to beat them there. I think that Baylor would be wise to try to slow this game down a bit and win it with their defense, which has been very good here of late. I don't know. I'm wondering what you think about the tempo in this game. I know Gonzaga wants to play really fast. Baylor has played 2 of their last 3 games against Villanova and Houston to 57 and 58 possessions. I know that's partially their opponent, but even their game against Arkansas was only 68 possessions, and Arkansas is just about as fast as Gonzaga. So I think Baylor looks like they've tried to slow things down a little bit. I'm kind of curious if you think, does Baylor try to slow this one down or not?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I mean, I think you have to. I think if you're trying to beat a Gonzaga offense in this game, I think you have to try to slow it down as much as possible. And something else that I was just looking at here, I was kind of running through some of the charts on Torvik's website. We talked about it already, where Gonzaga shares the basketball really well. I'm sure for you with a coaching background, you love watching this Gonzaga offense. Yeah. Just the way they share the ball, the way they get so many clean looks, the way they get the ball into the post and all of that. And something for Baylor that I noticed here, and even in this NCAA tournament where Villanova's got a pretty high assist rate, but Gillespie is the facilitator on offense, he's got far and away the highest assist rate on that team, and he wasn't in that game. Wisconsin doesn't stand out in that department. Arkansas really doesn't. They have a lot of guys that try to create their own shots. They don't really share the ball particularly well, and neither does Houston. Gonzaga does that. And so, to me, if I'm looking at this game and I'm Scott Drew, I'm thinking about the pace we have to play at in the defensive half court is going to take a lot of energy for us. We don't see a lot of teams in the Big 12 that share the basketball well. One of the best teams that shared the basketball was Kansas State, and they sucked offensively. So I think Baylor's running around a lot in the defensive half court. So if I'm Scott Drew, I have no interest in playing a transition game against Gonzaga, because we're going to burn a lot of energy on defense. So we're going to slow the game down on offense as much as we possibly can. So I think Baylor's game plan here is to try and play at a pretty slow pace in this game, trying to kind of conserve their energy as much as they can for the offensive half court. And that's another reason why I kind of like Gonzaga here. I think that this style of play will make Baylor uncomfortable. And they will be running around a lot in the defensive half court because Gonzaga just shares the ball so well that maybe it forces Baylor in the second half of this game to kind of speed up a little bit if they're not having any defensive success. But I think they're going to try and get this game to a crawl as much as they can.
I would think so. It would surprise me if they want this to be an absolute track meet. I don't think that's their best path to victory in a game like this. I did want to bring up, too, that I had a listener send me a message and ask about the first half numbers, ATS for both teams. Gonzaga is 19-10 ATS in the first half. I don't think anybody's too surprised by that. Baylor 14-11 ATS in the first half. Second half wise, Gonzaga 14-15, Baylor 8-13-3 ATS. I don't know if we should read too much into the second half because both of these teams have been so far ahead in most of their games that the second half didn't matter too much. But from a first half standpoint, Gonzaga's been very good. Obviously, a lot of those were against teams that weren't very good. So as far as the first half in this game, the only lean I would have is the under. 75.5 is a pretty high total in the first half of a game where, this is in a football stadium with a tough shooting backdrop. And like I said, I realized that these two teams could knock down 3 after 3 and it wouldn't be totally stunning. It's just this number is really high. So I have to lean that way. As far as the side, like you, I kind of like Gonzaga minus the points on the full game. I don't know that I want to bet the first half on Gonzaga. There are some questions as to how they would play in the first half after such a big game in the last game. And, I think Baylor, a team that's probably going to be much better on defense than what Gonzaga has been used to. Now, is that going to be enough? I don't know that it will be. I think Gonzaga is a deeper team, a more balanced team than is Baylor. So, my strongest lean on a side here is the full game on Gonzaga. And like I said, if I had to take something in the first half, I do see some 76s. So under 76 in the first half would be my lean as well.
Yeah, and again, as I look at this, and this is an angle that I didn't really consider writing up the guide, but it's something I'm thinking about here now. Kansas State, 31st in the country in assist rate, but also 286th in effective field goal percentage. So they share the ball, but they don't make a whole lot of shots. That's a big problem for them. TCU, a team that did okay in the assist department, but other than that, in the Big 12, there's not a lot of teams with a high assist rate on their made shots. A lot of these teams kind of play sort of isolation basketball, and maybe that helps a team like Baylor, not only with the turnovers, kind of forcing guys into bad spots that are overhandling the basketball, but it also, to that end, as you talked about, Baylor's bad at post defense. A lot of teams in the Big 12 don't really run a lot of post offense. And one of the things that we've talked about a lot here throughout this NCAA tournament, and something I mentioned I will carry over into future tournaments, is that teams that are made uncomfortable, teams that are taken out of their comfort zones, have really struggled in this tournament. And it was a big hallmark for a lot of the teams in the Big Ten. And one of the big reasons why most of them were out before the first weekend was even over. So I think that there's a very good chance that Gonzaga makes Baylor uncomfortable here, makes Baylor play a style of basketball that they have not seen a whole lot, and one that may fluster them a little bit on the defensive end, where they have had their challenges here, not necessarily in this tournament, but they have had their challenges in the second half of the regular season. So for me, it is Gonzaga. You find the -4, you pay the 115, you get the -4.5 at reduced juice, something like that. That is the side I will have for this one. Not really looking too much at the total because we don't know what kind of foul fest we're going to get. We don't know how this game will be called and all of that. But I think that even though Baylor is as good of a team as they are, I think this is a pretty decent matchup for Gonzaga, all things considered.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And like we said, a 2-point line adjustment at the end of the season is quite a bit. It doesn't sound like a lot to people, but we've seen these teams that much throughout the course of the season. We kind of already knew what they were. Gonzaga plays one tight game, which probably shouldn't have been as close as it was, other than UCLA making a lot of contested long twos. I don't think we can adjust the line 2 points based on that. So I'm going to go with Gonzaga as well here. I'll have at least some money on Gonzaga in this one, lean the under as well. So, like I said, that's just not a numbers play as much, leaning to the under as it is. I know that this angle is done well in the long term. If you take a really high under in a neutral site game, in an important game, the under's done very well. So it's not one that you can get excited to bet between these two, because they're certainly capable of a 95 to 92 game, but this is a really high total. So I lean that way, and I like Gonzaga as well. Hopefully we see that great game that everybody's predicting, because, we've been talking about this game for a long time. You remember earlier in the season when they were supposed to play each other, and now we finally get to see it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's an excellent point. I forgot they were supposed to play each other. So, yeah, looking forward to this one tonight, to be sure. And, as I just mentioned, going to try to look at these angles a lot more for upcoming NCAA tournaments of, teams having to play a style that they don't see in conference play. And I've talked about how one of the things that I've hypothesized here about the Pac-12 is that conference had success because there are a lot of different styles of play in that league. You see a zone from Washington. You see teams that kind of push the tempo like the Arizona schools. You see teams that really slow it to a crawl like UCLA. You see teams that have a lot of post height like USC. You see a lot of different things in the Pac-12. In the Big Ten, a lot of boilerplate teams where it's really a question of talent. A lot of them play kind of similar styles and all of that. So you get the NCAA tournament and maybe you don't match up as well, or it's something you haven't seen and you don't adjust well enough in that one and done format. So even though it was a weird, unconventional Indianapolis bubble tournament, there are some things that I've kind of pulled out of it for some of these future NCAA tournaments. Kyle, what about you? Is there something you're taking away from this year's NCAA tournament specifically that you're going to try and keep in mind more in the future?
I think we should weight more heavily a team, how they defend the paint and how they score in the paint, because I don't know that we've weighed enough into, these teams that dominate in the paint. It's a team like Gonzaga. I mean, they're plus 21.8 points per game or something like that in the paint. I think Baylor's plus 8.5 or something. So they've been good, but I think how a team defends really close to the basket. I know it sounds simple, and it sounds like we should have, weighted it really heavily, but it's something that I don't think we've weighed heavily enough. We talk about the wanting either a contested or an uncontested three or a shot near the hoop and not the mid-range jumpers. However, a team like UCLA was great in the mid-range. And obviously there can be some teams that kind of stand out and are not part of the pack analytically. But I do think that how a team defends the paint is really important, because there's two things that usually happen there. Either a team is not very good in the paint because they don't have very good help defense. And we've seen some of that in the NCAA tournament. Some teams, a guy gets beat and that's it. Nobody comes to help. That's really frustrating if you're watching, especially as somebody who's tried to coach some in the past. It's frustrating to just watch a guy just get to the hoop and nobody stops the ball. On the other side, the other thing that makes your paint defense bad is when you give up a ton of second chance points. And I've talked about that before. I still think that rebounding margin is extremely important. I think that looking at how a team does in the rebounding margin and how a team defends inside the paint is really important. I know that a lot of people want to say, well, 3-point defense or 3-point offense is still, so much more important because, so many more threes are being taken than before. That's true. I'm not saying that that's not true, but I think that these teams that give up so many points in the paint are at such a disadvantage, especially come the NCAA tournament time, because, if you're not making that outside shot, if you can dominate in the paint or if you're getting second chance points, it doesn't really matter. I mean, you can still win those games. You just have to be decent defensively there. Some of these teams that have been so poor defensively near the basket just have no chance to make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. I think that's something that I need to weight a little bit more heavily coming into next season.
So you and I have done this show for a long time. We go back to 2013 doing our college football and then also our college basketball shows. So you knew this question was coming. At the end of the season here, in a very weird season with the COVID pauses, the back-to-backs on the schedule playing the same team, not really much in the form of attendance, very unconventional, different kind of college basketball season. But with that in mind, is there something you feel like you did really well here for this college basketball season that you will carry over into the future?
Adam, I did know this question was coming, and to be honest, I don't really like to think about this season too much because it's just not been a good one for me. So, I can't say that I did anything too well other than get a ton of closing line value, and
But that is important. I mean, that's huge.
yeah, it is. It is. It's just they've gone to the CLV bonfire, so those are frustrating. My closing line value this year was better than it has been the last two seasons. My results were worse than they've been the last two seasons. I've been a coin flipper this year, and we know that's not a good thing, especially when you're paying, minus 110 or whatever the juice is. So I've had a disappointing season. Certainly, it's bothered me a lot. I hate for the clients that got involved and have done poorly this year. My long-term record in college basketball is excellent. I still think I have an edge when it comes to college basketball. That doesn't change, based on one poor season. At the same time, like I said, it's frustrating. I do think that I'm still good when it comes to market entry and knowing when to get the best price. I feel like that's a strength of mine across the board from sport to sport, is knowing the market and knowing what side somebody's going to want to bet, or knowing what total, somebody's going to want to bet the under here, somebody's going to want to bet the over. So I want to grab it at a certain time. I think that's probably my biggest strength. And it's continued to be that way this year. Like I said, unfortunately, that hasn't mattered in the results, and that's what matters to most people in the end. We know that the process is important, and if you're getting that CLV in the long term, it's going to be better. But still sucks for the people that were on board, and I do apologize for that. I hate that. And Adam, you know me well enough to know that I've had quite a few long nights thinking about this and being pissed off about the fact that I didn't do better.
But with that being said, having all that closing line value, do you wish you would have bet more? Because obviously you had a good feel on the market. The way that you were rating your teams was good, because when you get closing line value and you kind of have that wisdom of crowds methodology and all that here with the betting market, you were getting line equity. You were getting line value. And it didn't play out the way that you had hoped. And that's the variance element, of betting on sports. But do you wish maybe you would have bet more?
Well, I mean,
I mean more games, not more money per game.
I was going to say, for a second, I was like, well, no, they lost. Yeah. So no, so no, not as far as the game, but yeah, if you look at my, my leans that didn't become plays, I should have bet more games this year. And the biggest time that I need to bet more games is early in the season. So one thing I'm going to change for future seasons is, and, people who are listening to this should know that come next year, when I'm betting college basketball, I'm going to bet a lot of games in November and December, and then I'm going to back off the volume later in the season. In general, I think November and December, I just crushed it in closing line value, and I did okay results wise then. I had a bad January and February. It seems like that's how I've been for several years in a row, and then March was just okay. But I find that my closing line value is so big early in the season, and I've had a lot of leans that I didn't play that I would have really done extremely well at the beginning of the season. So yes, I think I probably should have bet more games. We've talked about this before, that part of the reason I don't bet more games is because I am, releasing these to a lot of clients who, if I go, 2-12 in a day with 14 plays, these guys, they can't handle that, and if I can, and I say, I'm going to move on, go the next day, bankroll, whether you have to re-up or whether you just, you've done well enough with your bankroll that you're still able to keep going. I think it's important that, people realize that everybody's going to hit some of those stretches. I hit more of these this year than I would have wanted by far, and more than I would have expected, but I do think that I should have played more games. I think that in the long run, people who have an edge that bet quite a few games are likely to be the ones that do the best in college basketball. There's just so many games, so many under the radar games, that I do think that's the best way to go about this. I don't like the theory that, you just try to pick one game. Adam, if I had $1 for every time somebody's told me, Kyle, here's what you need to do. You need to take one game, the one game that you're most confident about, that sure winner. Just take that one game. And then that's it. Just take the one game. I mean, I've joked about this, talking with other people before. Yeah, I'll just take the one that I know is going to win. And then that's it. I mean, it sounds so easy, right? But it's not. That's not the way it goes. And I don't think that trying to pick one or two or three games is necessarily going to be better in the long run. In fact, I think when you have an edge, betting more games would make more sense. But as far as the biggest change I think I should make, I think I should bet a lot more games very early in the season, and then back off on my volume in the middle and end of the season.
See, and that's such an interesting and challenging dynamic too, because college football is going on and the NFL. And the NFL is a market that I'm not going to say it handicaps itself because it's really not that simplistic of a process. But, relative to the time you spend on college football and college basketball, the NFL is certainly nominal. But also, like in November, you've got all this shit going on. I mean, I know that you occasionally throw out an NHL play. You've got the NBA sometimes too. But college football season is still going on. And as we know, in this business, if you're a multi-sport handicapper, college football and NFL are like way up at the top of the board. And then everything else in terms of interest level, in terms of action, handle, all that kind of thing, it's all about football in this business when it's football season. And so that's a very difficult thing too, of, kind of weighing that balance. But at the same time, if November college basketball is where you're getting line value November and December, then that is absolutely something that you need to focus on more. And it's easier said than done, certainly with everything else that's going on. But that's the big thing here. And we joke about this, and I talked about it a lot, up until the pandemic actually did stop all the sports. I just wanted 2 weeks of no sports, just not having to give a shit about sport because it will burn you out. There is no break. There is no downtime. And especially for me as somebody who does baseball the way that I do and covering everything out, golf and NASCAR and all this other shit, there is no break. And it is very hard to sit there and say that, in November, I'm going to bet more college basketball. And then November rolls around and you've got, 8 college football games on a Saturday, 20 college basketball games on a Saturday. You got 28 bets in play. It is emotionally draining when you're doing so many other things. So it's a very tough industry, man. And so, you had a bad year and it happens. And there are a lot of reasons and a lot of explanations as to why. But, for people I have people all the time that email me and they're like, Adam, how do I get a start in the business? How do I, get myself to a point where I can make a living betting sports? And I'm like, how much time do you have for an answer? Because there are a lot of layers to this business, to say the least. And that's why, I try to push you guys that I have on the show of, that soul searching process of what should I do differently? What worked? What do I need to hammer on more? And it always winds up being easier said than done. And I hope that you do follow through with it, because I do think that you have big advantages in November and December when other people are worried about other things and you can focus in on college basketball. I think you got to do it, man. I really think you do.
I'm absolutely going to bet more games next November. Like you said, this is far easier said than done because, a lot of times I get to that point of the season and I say, okay, I'll just kind of edge my way into college basketball because I have to focus on college football right now. I have so many clients in college football. Look, I mean, I'm still going to focus on college football quite a bit, so I don't want to make it sound like I'm not going to do college football. At the same time, I have to jump on these college basketball at the beginning of the season because there have been many seasons here recently where I would have been up a lot more at the beginning of the year if I'd have been betting more games. And I don't think that I can continue to think that, I'll pick up my volume later in the season. Well, picking up volume later in the season, well, I don't think it's necessarily bad because, I do think that by beating the closing line as much as I have, you wouldn't expect my record to be as poor as it was, especially in January and February. But when it comes to November college hoops, most people don't care about college hoops then, like you said. And I'm going to need to make sure that I care a lot about college hoops during that time. So in the future, that's going to be a major goal of mine, is to just fire away early in the season. And then when everybody else is picking up their volume later in the season, I'm probably slowing down a little bit because I know the market's more efficient.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And obviously this year, I think you probably would have attacked November college basketball more, but like we didn't even know if there was going to be a season or who was going to play or anything like that. So look, man, every year is unique. And obviously this season had a lot more challenges than any other season in our lifetimes. But, again, I mean, I think that we've all kind of found out a lot of things about ourselves, about not only how we conduct ourselves professionally but also personally over this last year. And whatever changes you can make for the better in any aspect of your life, I think makes sense. And for you, if you can attack something where you feel like you do have that edge and get some of that swagger back a little bit coming off the tough year, I think it's absolutely something that you definitely have to take a look at. As I said, not much downtime, but I guess things do kind of slow down for you a little bit here with the Major League Baseball season. You're a very solid baseball handicapper. Once again, you look a lot at totals, as you tend to do in a lot of these sports betting markets here. But let's just start in terms of some overall strategy, because in college basketball, you might have 115, 120, 140 games on a Saturday. In baseball, you've got up to 15. I mean, that's the max unless you get a doubleheader or something like that. So, do you look to carry kind of a lower volume approach? Are you looking to play any edge that you have? How's that sort of play out for you with Major League Baseball?
I've backed my volume off a bit in Major League Baseball compared to what I did years ago as well. I would say on an average day with 15 games, I probably have 3 bets, something like that is my normal, maybe even 2 or 3. The games, if I really like them, 4 or 5, I don't think I ever have more than 5 bets in a day nowadays, in Major League Baseball. I do want to say too, as far as my strategy in Major League Baseball, I actually have done really well on sides in Major League Baseball. I went back and looked at this closely a few weeks ago before the season started. I've done better on money line bets in Major League Baseball than I have on totals, and that's different than in most of the sports. Certainly, now I've done well on totals. I've just done even better on money line bets. I think that money line sport is far different to handicap than a spread sport. Adam, this with the Major League Baseball and hockey and things like that. It's far different because there's only going to be so many runs or so many goals. It's not like there's 3-point shots and 2-point shots and things like that. It's very different. I think one of my strengths in baseball is I'm very good at getting a good price. Like I said, in other sports, I've been good at that as well. But I think that one thing that's kind of overlooked, and I know, Adam, you know this for sure, but a lot of listeners would kind of, while they know it's true, they don't realize how true it is. Grabbing a good price is really important. And I think the listeners, I wanted to really stress this point. If you're laying minus 130 when you could be laying minus 121, if you're getting plus 130 when you could be getting plus 140, you really got to do the best you can, because that's going to hurt your results a lot by the end of the season. This is a marathon of a season. Every time that you miss a few cents, you win that underdog, and instead of getting plus 140, you got plus 130. In the moment you say, well, at least I won, no big deal. It is a pretty big deal. You need to get the very best line you possibly can. I think it's important to say too, you study the market, see which teams the market wants to bet, see which pitchers the market wants to bet. And Adam does a great job on his segment on the Bettor's Box talking about, the market movement and saying, where do you think the line's going to move on one team, or where has the market been betting it? The market is pretty consistent. And Adam, this, I think that time and time again, we see them want to bet certain pitchers, or we see them want to bet certain teams. And it usually doesn't go away after 1 or 2 starts. This happens for a while. Something big is going to have to change. So many of these line moves, I feel like, are pretty predictable. I think it's important for people to know that, getting the best price in Major League Baseball is supremely important, because some people might think, well, the spread sports, it's more important because, if you get a -4 in basketball instead of -5, that could make the difference, based on it being a point difference. Sure, it can, but in a money line sport, it's more important than most people think as well, because like I said, if you take a loss at -130 when you should have taken a loss at -121, that's going to add up a lot in the long run. The same way when it comes to an underdog. So I think that's really important to start with. And I'll say my method of going about Major League Baseball is I try to use a combination of situational spots, traditional numbers, advanced metrics to make my MLB plays. And I'll say right from the top, I don't know these players as well as Adam does. I don't think hardly anybody knows these baseball players as well as Adam does. And Adam is a fantastic MLB resource. So, reading his daily content and listening to the Bettor's Box, certainly very important. I think that you can learn a lot from that. I don't know the players as well as Adam does. What I try to do here is I look for pitcher home road splits, day and night splits, first half, second half splits. That's what I mean as far as traditional numbers. The advanced metrics, Adam talks a lot about those. I do look at those a lot more than I did a few years ago. I also look at umpire data a lot, weather. I think that's really important as well, because you can beat the closing line pretty easily with weather by looking at the forecast and knowing, winds are blowing out here, they're blowing in at this place. But I did want to say that I think as far as those traditional stats, and I'll see what Adam thinks on this one as well, the home road splits as far as starting pitchers are well known. They're well documented. But I think it's important to point out that some pitchers are no good at the beginning of the season and are much stronger in the second half. And you have other guys who are very good in the month of April, and by the time September rolls around, they stink. And it's pretty consistent on some of those guys. And I don't think the first half, second half splits have been talked about as much or are as well known. So I think that gives them more value as far as a bettor.
Yeah, I think all that stuff is pretty accurate. The one thing that I don't really look at too much, I don't look too much at umpires, but I have been trying to look a little bit more at the weather stuff, especially, with what we're seeing here as far as the baseball goes so far. And, last year the season only really played in warmer weather, so, things a little bit skewed from that. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of layers to a baseball handicap, and I think watching the market is a really important one. And, you and I were talking today before we started recording that, so far I've had basically negative closing line value on just about all the plays that I've made, which is not at all the case. I mean, last year, I won more games than I lost. I was down a little bit from the juice and some of the things like that, but had good closing line value. And, it's always interesting to kind of pick up on who the market will like, who the market won't like. Generally speaking, that's a strength for me. So far this year, I haven't really picked up on it too well. I think part of it is because a lot of people aren't even using this 2020 season that we just saw. But something else about the Major League Baseball market is that, you get a lot of arbitrage. You get a lot of middling where big groups, syndicate groups, deep-pocketed groups, all of that are they're betting one side to come back and play the other side. And they're basically free-rolling Major League Baseball, grabbing their 10, 12-cent middle, whatever it is, and just kind of aggregating their bankroll that way, betting large amounts of dollars on this across multiple accounts or multiple sports books, whatever else. So you will see a lot of different waves of market movement. You'll see a wave on the overnights. You'll see a wave in the morning after the previous day's games have been kind of analyzed and tracked by all the metric sites and all of that. You'll see line moves when the lineup comes out. Then you'll also see line moves that are obvious buyback situations where people are just kind of arbitraging and scraping the market and just sort of playing it that way. But like you said, it's so much different from a spread market where a spread might move a point here and there, something like that over the course of the week or over the course of the afternoon. But in baseball, it's like a living organism. It's just always in some sort of state of flux. So market entry is really important. And for me, producing a gigantic article every day, I submit the plays when I submit the article, for transparency and tracking purposes and all of that. But if you are able to watch the market throughout the course of the day, it moves up and down quite a bit. And if you've got a target price in mind, there's a good chance you're going to get there with it.
Yeah. I think, for you writing the article and putting them out at that time, it's a little bit more difficult to necessarily get the very best of the number. And I think you understand that, and people who are reading that understand that. But, somebody that knows baseball as well as you do, it's really helpful to people. And I don't think I'd be too concerned if I were you, just based on a small sample size, not beating the closing line, because, we're only this far into the season. I imagine that will change around. But I did want to say, as far as the umpire data real quick, these guys have a lot of control over the game, the home plate umpire. I think it is pretty important. I have a database of all the umpires, their strikeout to walk rate, strikes called over the past 6 years. I do want to say real quick, because people have asked me, over under umpires, there are a couple guys you don't want any part of if you want an over, and that's Miller and Eddings. Those two are absolute under machines. Every time Miller's behind home plate, every time Eddings is behind home plate, one of my first leans that I write down is always the under. I don't always play it, but I at least have to look at it. And then as far as an over umpire, Marquez is a great example. Really small strike zone, does not punch out very many people, a lot of walks with him. Swish Analytics is a good site for that. You can look at umpire factors, park factors, things like that. So for listeners that want to look into that a little bit more, I recommend that site. You can look at the weather from there. You can also look at what the umpires have done as far as a lot of times they look at it from kind of a fantasy baseball perspective, but we know there's plenty of overlap there when you're looking at, you want a high scoring game if you're taking players in fantasy baseball, a DFS, but you also want to see, what kind of run value you might have if you're taking an over under. So there is a lot of overlap there. And then one other thing I want to say about the weather too, everybody knows that Wrigley weather is important, and we know why they don't put out a total overnight, because the weather is so important. There's a couple others that I thought were pretty interesting that I wanted to point out here really quick too. Comerica and Detroit, with a temperature of 65 or higher and an average wind of 10 miles per hour or more blowing out, the over is 50 and 23 in the last 73 contests. So Comerica has been a really good one when it comes to ballparks where an over would make a lot of sense when the weather is such that it fits that angle. I'm kind of looking at these as I talk a little bit more. The other one that stands out, the Phillies home games with the wind blowing in, the under is 36 and 18 with a wind of 8 miles per hour or more blowing in. And the blowing out, it's done really well there too. So apparently Citizens Bank is a place where the weather matters quite a bit, because I said it was 36 and 18 with it blowing in, and with it blowing out for the Phillies home games, 85 and 44. So that's going to be one that I'm going to look at a little bit more. I didn't realize it was that impressive. I know Fenway is another one. Fenway, the weather is really important. So just some quick tidbits that people can pay attention to this year. If you have any questions on things like this, you can certainly reach out to me on Twitter at Kyle Hunter Picks as well. But I think weather is important. One other thing I want to say, and Adam helped me with this. I know Adam has harped on this in the past. He's absolutely right. Defense fielding is more important than most people think. I don't think the marketplace values fielding enough. These teams that are really good defensively, I think can be underrated by the marketplace. So I think that's something that you want to pay attention to also going forward. And like I said, I try to take a, look at everything standpoint here. I don't know the advanced metrics as well as Adam does. I don't know the players as well as he does. I try to look at a little bit of everything, and, it's worked for me. I'm 99 units up since 2010 in Major League Baseball on 1 unit flat betting. So it's been a really good sport for me. Like I said, money line, I've actually done a little bit better than totals. But I think there is money to be made in the Major League Baseball market. It's a long grind, and I did want to say bankroll management is really crucial here. And this is a marathon, not a sprint. I think it's okay to take off a couple days in Major League Baseball. If you need to clear the mind because things have been running bad, I think that's a good time of the year to just say, you know what, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to take a quick trip, clear the mind. I think it's a good idea because, if your mind's not in the right place in such a long marathon, this is a really long season.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And for me, there's a lot of data, a lot of stuff that I break down. And, sometimes I feel like I can probably overanalyze some of the games. But, I think there are so many edges to be had out there. And we've talked a lot about metric sites for college basketball. And, I wish there were some better ones for college football. Maybe we'll get to that point. But, there's just so much stuff out there that you could use for your handicapping process. And, Kyle mentioned umpires and some of the weather factors and all that. And, it makes sense. A ballpark like Comerica, very, very spacious outfield. One of the best batter's eyes in Major League Baseball. A lot of guys have said that. I know Eno Saris has written an article about that, where it's not a big park for home run power, but it's a really big park for doubles and triples power with that batter's eye, the spacious outfield, all of that. So if you get a boost from the wind, that makes sense. Those are things that I can look at it analytically. Kyle can look at it maybe more qualitatively with the weather, and we can put together why that's an angle that's really, really good. So you can do a lot of that type of stuff with baseball, and there are a lot of different things you can take a look at. And as Kyle said, he's always approachable on Twitter at Kyle Hunter Picks to help you out with any of that baseball stuff. But Man, I'll tell you what, it's going to be weird flying solo for the next several Mondays here, doing the Betters Box by myself because, since August, it's been you and I on Mondays, and I know we did a couple of 2-week shows for the NCAA tournament and all of that, but I got to say, on a professional level, I love having you on the show. You give a lot of great insight, a lot of good analysis, a lot of stuff I think is very actionable for our listeners. And also, too, I mean, look, we've been doing this for a long time. I think we've got a really good rapport with our listeners, a very loyal crowd that we have. But from a personal standpoint, I love doing this show every Monday with you, man. It's great to talk to you. I know we have a lot of the same bitches and the same gripes about the industry, but also, we have a lot of good things to share with each other, things that help both of us grow as handicappers, but also just being able to talk to you, man. I'm glad that we started this thing back in 2013, and that I found you when Bang the Book was, I also had a handicapper side of the site, and that we started doing this together, and it's been a great friendship for 8 years now. And I love chatting with you, man. I love doing the Monday show, and I'm gonna miss it here throughout the spring and summer.
Yeah, I will as well, man. I share those sentiments, and I have to say to the listeners, I think Adam works as hard as anybody I know. And I really respect that a lot, Adam. You bust your ass to get everything done that you can. You cover so many different sports. You put out this show, put all the content out there that's very helpful for people. So if you've been tuning into this show, I really suggest you continue to tune into the Betters Box and keep checking out Adam's daily article in Major League Baseball. It will help you. And like I said, I also really enjoy doing these shows. I always look forward to doing this. Part of the reason this one's so much fun is that Adam does such a good job being prepared for these. We can really bounce ideas off each other. It's a great conversation back and forth. The time really flies in this. So thank you for having me on the show again throughout the course of the season. I certainly appreciate it a lot. Also, thank you to the listeners of the show. I know there's a lot of loyal listeners, like you said, a lot of great people who I've really loved getting the chance to interact with, get a chance to interact with quite a few of them. I am approachable, like you said. If you want to reach out to me at Kyle Hunter Picks, Kyle@huntersportspicks.com is the email. And again, yeah, man, 8 years, it's hard to believe it's been that long, but then I think back, when we first were talking, my son wasn't even born yet, and he's 7 now, and it's hard to believe it's been that long, but I guess it has to have been. We've covered this for quite a while, and I appreciate you a lot, and the fact that you do such great work. Like I said, I really respect your work a lot. I have a lot of fun chatting with you, and our friendship is important to me as well. So I appreciate this, and let's look forward to next football season, and good luck to you in the Major League Baseball season, and I hope everybody continues to tune in.
Well, certainly good luck to you with the baseball season as well. Kyle Hunter, professional bettor over at huntersportspicks.com. Tell the people what's going on over there right now, man.
So you can head over to huntersportspicks.com. You check out all my premium packages there. The rest of the NBA season is up. I have done well in the NBA this year, and some people have said, why aren't you doing more NBA? You're better in it than college basketball. I still don't think that's the case. It's smaller sample size, and long term, I think college basketball will do better. I know that's probably not a great sales pitch because, NBA is what's left, but just trying to be honest and transparent. Up 99 units, flat betting, like I said, 1 unit per game since 2010 in Major League Baseball. You can mention ATS Radio. I did a newsletter special, $399 for early bird. That's through April 8th. You can reach out to me at Kyle Hunter Picks on Twitter and Kyle@huntersportspicks.com.
Yeah, make sure you follow Kyle on Twitter again at Kyle Hunter Picks. And like I said, man, it's a treat. I love it every Monday. I'll miss it, but you know what? I think it's probably good for you to take a little bit of a step back here as well, and do the family thing as the weather gets better, and have a little bit more time for all those kinds of things. So always appreciate you, man. Always appreciate your insights on the show. Thank you so much for joining me, and talk to you again soon.
I appreciate it, my friend. Thanks.
There you go. There's Kyle Hunter. Once again, at Kyle Hunter Picks on Twitter. huntersportspicks.com is the website. Coming up on Tuesday, Brian Blessing will join me. We'll chat about the Masters. Also take a look at NASCAR at Martinsville. Maybe some NHL stuff. Who knows? We'll see how long we spend on the Masters, which will, of course, will be the highlight of that Tuesday segment. Thursday, the Betters Box. And then going forward, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday with ATS Radio. Monday, Thursday, the Betters Box. Tuesday, Brian Blessing, because we talk golf and NASCAR and some of those other markets. That'll do it for me. Thank you so much for listening, everybody, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.